Be me. Suzanne, 42, Human Resources Director. Sitting in my office at 2 a.m., staring at old performance reviews I wrote, hands literally shaking as I read my own words from 5 years ago. Employee shows concerning patterns of mansplaining and microaggressions toward female colleagues. I wrote that about Marcus, a junior developer who literally just asked clarifying questions during meetings. Destroyed his career trajectory with one bullshit performance review. He was transferred to a dead-end position within months. What the actual fuck was wrong with me? Flashback to 2019, me, sitting in this same office. Marcus needs to understand that his communication style is problematic, I told his manager Sarah. He constantly interrupts women and talks over them in meetings. Except he didn't. I watched the meeting recordings tonight. He waited for people to finish, asked thoughtful questions, never once interrupted anyone. But I had already decided he was guilty of existing while male in my department. Sarah trusted my expertise on workplace dynamics. Marcus got written up for creating an uncomfortable environment for female employees. There were no complaints from female employees. I made that shit up entirely. Current me wants to scream at past me. What the hell were you thinking, you absolute psychopath? You ruined an innocent person's life because it made you feel important. You weaponized your position to satisfy some twisted power fantasy. But past me would have responded with her usual bullshit. I'm protecting women from systemic oppression, Suzanne. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Marcus represents everything wrong with male privilege in tech. God, I actually said that last one out loud to my assistant Jennifer. Thinking about David now, software engineer from 2020, brilliant guy, actually mentored female junior developers on his own time, but he made the fatal mistake of disagreeing with me during a diversity training session. I think we should focus on qualifications rather than demographics when hiring, he said. Perfectly reasonable statement, delivered respectfully. But past me heard it as a direct attack on everything I stood for. David just revealed his true colors, I told myself that night. Classic example of someone who claims to support equality but undermines it when convenient. Started building a case against him immediately. Documented every single interaction David had with female coworkers. Twisted innocent conversations into evidence of bias. When he offered to help Jessica debug her code, I wrote it down as condescending behavior. When he suggested a different approach during a team meeting, I labeled it dismissive of women's ideas. Jessica literally thanked him for the help. The team meeting idea was objectively better than what they were doing. Didn't matter to me, I was on a fucking crusade. Spent 3 months building my case against David. He's exhibiting patterns of subtle discrimination, I told his director Kevin. Women on his team report feeling marginalized and undervalued, complete fabrication. I never spoke to any women on his team about David, but Kevin trusted me. I was the human resources director with specialized training in unconscious bias. David got transferred to a different team with a lower profile project. His promotion got delayed indefinitely. He eventually left the company for a position 2 levels below where he should have been. Current me is absolutely disgusted. You destroyed someone's career over a fucking diversity training comment. He was literally one of the good ones, helping women advance, and you crucified him. What kind of monster were you? Past me would have doubled down, though. The impact matters more than intent, Suzanne. David needed to learn that his privilege has consequences. Sometimes good people perpetuate harmful systems without realizing it. Actually wrote that last line in his performance review. Makes me physically sick to read it now. But the worst one was Tyler. God help me. Fresh graduate, 23 years old, excited about his first real job. Worked in our marketing automation department. Kid was eager, asked lots of questions, stayed late to learn new systems. Reminded me of myself when I started in human resources 15 years ago. Except Tyler had the audacity to be a straight white male. In my twisted worldview, that made him automatically guilty of something. Tyler made the mistake of being friendly with Rachel, the marketing coordinator. They'd grab coffee together, chat about work projects, typical office friendship. But I decided it was inappropriate. Tyler seems to be forming exclusionary relationships with female colleagues, I noted in my files. His behavior suggests he views women as potential romantic interests rather than professional equals. Rachel was fucking engaged to her longtime boyfriend. Tyler was gay, not that it should have mattered, but I didn't bother learning basic facts about people before destroying them. Started monitoring Tyler's interactions obsessively. When he complimented Rachel's presentation, I called it infantilizing praise. When he disagreed with her timeline estimate, I labeled it undermining female authority. When he brought donuts for the team, I wrote performative gestures to mask underlying bias. Everything this kid did got twisted into evidence of sexism. I was literally manufacturing discrimination cases out of thin air. The breaking point came during the holiday party planning committee. Tyler suggested having the party at a local brewery instead of the usual hotel conference room. It would be more relaxed and fun, he said. Rachel agreed, thought it was a great idea, but I saw it as Tyler pushing an agenda that excluded women. He's trying to create a boys' club atmosphere, I told myself. Alcohol-focused venues make women uncomfortable and give men more social power. Started typing up a formal complaint that same night. Tyler's suggestion demonstrates a fundamental lack of awareness about inclusive environments, I wrote. His preference for alcohol-centric venues suggests prioritization of male-coded social activities. This pattern indicates deeper issues with respect for diverse colleague needs. Sent it to his manager Bruce with a recommendation for immediate corrective action. Tyler got called into Bruce's office the next day, got lectured about sensitivity and inclusion for an hour. Kid walked out looking like someone had kicked his puppy. Tyler started walking on eggshells after that, stopped participating in team discussions, declined invitations to group lunches, worked with his head down, no more friendly conversations. I told myself it was progress. He's finally learning to check his privilege, past me thought. Sometimes people need a wake-up call to examine their behavior. But, really, I had just terrorized an innocent young man into social isolation. Kid was probably developing anxiety about every workplace interaction. Final straw came 6 months later. Tyler was up for his first performance review and potential promotion. He'd done excellent work, exceeded all his metrics, got glowing feedback from clients, but I made sure his review included a note about interpersonal development needs. While Tyler demonstrates technical competence, he requires ongoing coaching regarding inclusive communication. His learning curve on cultural sensitivity has been slower than expected for someone in his position. Blocked his promotion with bureaucratic doublespeak and manufactured concerns. Tyler left the company 3 weeks later. Found out years later that Tyler struggled to get hired anywhere else. Word travels fast in our industry, especially negative references. Spent 8 months unemployed, had to move back with his parents. Eventually took a position way below his skill level just to pay bills, all because I decided his existence threatened my personal mission. I single-handedly derailed a young man's career over absolutely nothing. Sitting here now, reading through all my old files, found at least 12 other cases where I pulled similar shit. Alex, in accounting, who questioned our mandatory bias training schedule, got written up for resistance to diversity initiatives. James, in product development, who mentioned his concern about hiring quotas, suddenly developed a pattern of insensitive comments in his file. Robert, in customer service, who had the audacity to point out that our sexual harassment training was biased against men, got transferred to a department where he couldn't advance. Every single one of them was guilty of nothing but existing in my presence while male, and having opinions that didn't perfectly align with my ideological crusade. I was like a fucking Spanish inquisitor rooting out heretics, except the heresy was just being a normal person who didn't worship at the altar of my particular brand of feminism. Current me wants to grab past me by the shoulders and shake her. You absolute fucking maniac. These were real people with families and dreams. Marcus had a pregnant wife when you destroyed his career. David was supporting his disabled father. Tyler was paying off student loans and trying to build a life. You crushed human beings to feed your own ego. But past me would have had ready justifications. The system is rigged against women, Suzanne. Someone has to balance the scales. These men benefit from centuries of oppression. A little setback builds character. Change requires sacrifice, and privileged groups need to understand consequences. I'm fighting the good fight, even if individuals get hurt in the process. I actually said that last one to my friend Monica over drinks. She looked uncomfortable but didn't challenge me. Probably thought I was just passionate about justice. The power rush was intoxicating, I can admit that now. Being the person who decided careers, who could make or break someone's future. Having directors and managers defer to my expertise on workplace dynamics. Employees walking on eggshells around me, knowing I could end them with a few keystrokes. I convinced myself it was about creating a better workplace for women. Really, it was about feeling important, feeling feared, feeling in control. Used to love the moment when I'd call someone into my office for a conversation, watching their face change as I delivered my carefully crafted accusations. We've received some concerns about your communication style. Some colleagues feel uncomfortable with certain behaviors you've exhibited. This isn't disciplinary, but we want to address these issues before they escalate. Always vague enough to avoid legal challenges, but specific enough to terrify them. Watched grown men stumble over themselves apologizing for crimes they hadn't committed. The women in the office started treating me like some kind of feminist superhero. Suzanne really advocates for us, they'd say. She's not afraid to call out problematic behavior. Finally, someone who understands what we deal with. They had no idea I was manufacturing most of the problems I claim to solve, creating hostile work environments and then positioning myself as the savior, like an arsonist who wants praise for putting out fires, kept detailed files on every male employee looking for patterns that didn't exist. March 15th. Interrupted Maria during stand-up meeting, lasted 3 seconds. March 22nd, used phrase "you guys" when addressing mixed group. March 28th, offered unsolicited advice to Jennifer about project timeline. Weaponized normal human interactions into evidence of systematic bias. Turned everyday workplace communication into a minefield of potential violations. Started mandatory unconscious bias workshops where I could lecture captive audiences. Microaggressions may seem harmless, but they create cumulative psychological damage. Intent doesn't matter, only impact, so examine your assumptions. Men need to step back and amplify women's voices instead of dominating conversations. Watching uncomfortable male faces as I delivered my sermons, they knew disagreeing meant becoming my next target. Created an atmosphere of fear disguised as enlightenment. Current me is absolutely horrified by past me's thought processes. You turned the workplace into your personal ideological battleground. You abused your authority to punish people for thought crimes. You were supposed to protect employees, not terrorize them. What the hell happened to basic human decency? Past me would have gotten defensive. I was correcting historical imbalances, Suzanne. Comfortable people don't change. Sometimes pressure is necessary. These men needed to understand what women face every day. My methods might seem harsh, but systemic change requires strong action. God, the rationalizations I created to justify my behavior, convinced myself I was fighting some noble war against oppression. The breaking point came last month when Marcus contacted me directly. Email subject line, following up on 2019 performance review. My blood went cold when I saw his name in my inbox. Spent 20 minutes staring at it before opening. Hi, Suzanne. I hope you're well. I wanted to reach out about the feedback I received during my time at the company. I've been working with a career coach to improve my communication style, but I'm struggling to understand what specific behaviors were problematic. Could we schedule a brief call to discuss? I want to make sure I don't repeat these mistakes in my current role. Read that email 15 times. Marcus had spent 3 years thinking he was genuinely a bad person, working with a coach, analyzing his behavior, trying to fix problems that never existed, carrying guilt and self-doubt because I convinced him he was harmful to his colleagues. Current me started crying right there at my desk. Oh my fucking God, what have you done? This man has been torturing himself because of your lies. He's questioning every interaction, every word, because you convinced him he's dangerous. Couldn't bring myself to respond to Marcus immediately. Spent days crafting and deleting replies. How do you tell someone their entire crisis of confidence is based on fabrications? Sorry, Marcus, I made everything up because I'm a sociopathic, power-hungry monster. Actually, you were fine. I just needed someone to destroy that week. Those female colleagues who complained, yeah, that never happened. Finally wrote back asking to meet in person. Told him I'd drive to his city, anywhere he felt comfortable. Met Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, more cautious, like someone who'd been burned. Started explaining how he'd been working on his communication issues, taking workshops on active listening and inclusive language, practicing conversations with his wife to avoid mansplaining, self-monitoring every workplace interaction for signs of bias. My heart was breaking listening to this earnest man describe his self-improvement journey that was completely fucking unnecessary. Marcus, I interrupted him, I need to tell you something important. The feedback you received in 2019, it wasn't accurate. Watched his face change from confusion to shock to anger. Explained how I had fabricated the complaints, twisted innocent interactions, manufactured evidence. Told him about my power complex, my ideological obsession, my complete abuse of authority. He sat there speechless for probably 5 minutes, then asked the question I was dreading. Why? Because I felt powerful, I admitted. Because I could, and it made me feel important and righteous. Because I convinced myself that hurting individual men was justified to advance women collectively. Because I was a fucking monster who got off on controlling people's lives. Marcus stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You destroyed my confidence for 3 years because it felt good. I questioned everything about myself, my marriage, my relationships with female friends. I thought I was this terrible person who made women uncomfortable just by existing. Watching Marcus process this information was devastating. Saw him cycle through disbelief, rage, grief, and back to rage. Do you have any idea what you put me through? He asked, voice shaking, hands clenched into fists. The therapy sessions, the self-doubt, the constant anxiety about saying the wrong thing. My wife thought I was having a breakdown because I kept apologizing for normal conversations. Current me wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Past me had created lasting psychological damage over absolutely nothing. Told Marcus about the others, David, Tyler, Alex, James, Robert. Explained how I'd built a system of manufactured persecution. Used my position to feed personal power fantasies disguised as social justice. Turned human resources into my personal weapon against anyone who didn't conform to my ideology. He listened with growing horror. How many people? He asked. How many lives did you fuck up for your entertainment? Couldn't give him an exact number, but it was dozens over 5 years. Current me arguing with past me all the way home. You're a fucking sociopath. Normal people don't destroy innocence for fun. Those weren't privileged oppressors. They were just regular working people. You had every advantage, education, position, authority, and used it to hurt people. What kind of twisted feminist destroys men who actually respect women? Past me would have kept defending herself. The patriarchy doesn't dismantle itself, Suzanne. Sometimes you have to take action. Those men needed to understand their privilege and learn from consequences. Individual discomfort is less important than systemic change. I was fighting for every woman who's been silenced or marginalized. Someone has to hold men accountable for centuries of oppression. The mental gymnastics I performed to justify psychological abuse were Olympic level. Spent the next week reaching out to everyone I could find. David now works at a startup making 60% of what he should be earning. Tyler eventually found success, but it took years to rebuild his confidence. Alex transferred to a different industry entirely after our company blacklisted him. James moved across the country for a fresh start. Robert developed clinical anxiety and still sees a therapist. My feminist activism left a trail of genuine human wreckage. Meeting each of them was like getting punched in the stomach repeatedly. David: I started questioning whether I actually belonged in tech. Tyler: I didn't. Speak up in meetings for 2 years after leaving. Alex: my family thought I'd done something terrible because I wouldn't explain why I changed careers. James: I recorded conversations with female coworkers to protect myself. Robert. I still get panic attacks during human resources meetings. Every conversation drove home how completely I'd fucked up their lives. Current me wants to scream at past me until my throat bleeds. Look at what you did. Look at the actual human cost of your little power trip. These weren't statistics or theoretical oppressors. They were real people with feelings and families and dreams. You turned into everything you claim to hate, an abuser hiding behind ideology. You're not a feminist, you're a fucking terrorist. Past me would have rationalized even this. Change is uncomfortable, Suzanne. Revolution requires sacrifice. These men learned valuable lessons about privilege and accountability. Their temporary discomfort helped create space for women to thrive. Someone has to be willing to make hard choices for the greater good. I was fighting systemic oppression the only way the system understands. Amazing how I convinced myself that sadistic cruelty was actually noble activism. Spent months trying to make amends, writing recommendation letters, making phone calls, contacted former managers to explain the truth about fabricated reviews, paid for Tyler's therapy sessions for 6 months, helped Marcus negotiate a better position with his current employer, donated to organizations that actually help people instead of destroying them, knowing that nothing I do can fully repair the damage I caused. Can't give someone back 3 years of self-doubt and anxiety. The worst part is realizing how completely unnecessary it all was. The women at our company were doing fine without my protection. They were capable, successful, respected professionals who didn't need me to manufacture persecution. My crusade solved problems that didn't exist and created real trauma in the process, turned allies into enemies and gave actual sexists ammunition to dismiss legitimate concerns. Set back genuine progress by making feminism look like vengeful ideology. Current me is filled with rage at past me's self-righteousness. You thought you were so fucking enlightened and progressive. Really, you were just a petty tyrant drunk on your own authority. You turned civil rights principles into weapons for personal gratification. You're the reason people think feminism is about hating men. You damaged the very cause you claim to champion. Past me would have dismissed all criticism as internalized misogyny. You're letting the patriarchy convince you that fighting back is wrong, Suzanne. Tone policing is just another way to silence women's anger. The system taught you to value male comfort over female justice. You're having a crisis of confidence because change feels dangerous. Remember why you started fighting in the first place. The circular logic I used to avoid accountability was impenetrable. Took a leave of absence to figure out what the fuck was wrong with me. Spent 3 months in therapy trying to understand my motivations. Dr. Peterson helped me trace the path from legitimate concerns about workplace equity to manufacturing persecution to feed power fantasies. You became addicted to the feeling of control, she explained. The ideology provided justification, but the real driver was narcissistic supply. You created problems so you could position yourself as the solution. Realized I'd turned feminism into a personal religion with myself as the high priestess. Anyone who questioned my methods was automatically branded a heretic. Created elaborate theological justifications for increasingly extreme behavior. Convinced myself that pure motives excused any tactics. Became exactly the kind of authoritarian I claimed to oppose. Just wearing different colored flags while marching people to the wall. Current me debates with past me constantly now. You weren't fighting oppression, you were becoming the oppressor. You used social justice language to mask personal sadism. You turned helping women into hurting men for your own entertainment. Everything you claimed to believe was just cover for being a fucking bully. You're a cautionary tale about ideological extremism. Past me's voice gets weaker in these arguments now. But systemic change requires individual sacrifice. The patriarchy doesn't respond to nice requests. Someone has to be willing to take difficult action. Historical progress always involves casualties. Even past me is starting to sound unconvinced by her own bullshit. Harder to maintain delusions when confronted with actual consequences. Wrote formal apology letters to everyone I could track down. not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging the truth. I abused my position to manufacture discrimination cases against innocent people. I fabricated complaints and twisted normal interactions into evidence of bias. I caused genuine psychological damage to satisfy personal power fantasies. I turned human resources into a weapon against anyone who didn't conform to my ideology. I am solely responsible for the harm I caused and deeply regret my actions. Some responded with grace, others with justified anger. Most didn't respond at all. Marcus wrote back, "Thank you for finally telling the truth. The damage is done, but at least now I can stop hating myself. Tyler, I hope you understand that your apology doesn't undo 3 years of therapy and self-doubt. David, I'm glad you recognize what you did, but I'll never trust human resources departments again. Alex, fuck you. Your letter is just more manipulation disguised as accountability. All completely fair responses to someone who'd terrorized them professionally. Resigned from my human resources director position last month. Couldn't continue in a role I'd perverted so completely. Sent a memo to the executive team explaining my misconduct. Recommended external investigations into all my personnel decisions from 2018 to 2022. Suggested policy changes to prevent future abuse of human resources authority. Acknowledged that my behavior had created legal liability for the company. Executive team was shocked, horrified, and probably scared shitless about lawsuits. Current me wants to keep screaming at past me forever. You turned helping people into hurting people. You corrupted every principle you claim to uphold. You made feminism look like a vindictive hate movement. You were supposed to protect employees, not hunt them. You became everything wrong with institutional power. Past me has fewer arguments now, mostly just deflection. Everyone makes mistakes in high-pressure positions. My intentions were good even if my methods were flawed. Other people have done worse things and gotten away with it, so at least I'm taking responsibility instead of covering it up. This experience will make me a better advocate in the future. Weak sauce compared to her previous ideological certainty. Working as a freelance consultant now, helping companies audit their human resources practices, specifically looking for signs of abuse of authority and manufactured grievances, trying to prevent other sociopaths from turning human resources into weapons. Funny how understanding your own capacity for evil makes you better at spotting it in others. Every policy manual I review, I think about how past me would have exploited those loopholes. Building safeguards against myself, basically. Still have the internal arguments with past me every day. How did you convince yourself that destroying innocent people was justice? What the fuck was wrong with your moral compass? How did helping women turn into hurting men for fun? Did you become such a complete piece of shit? What would actual feminists think of your reign of terror? Past me's responses are getting pathetic. I was under a lot of stress. The system pushed me to extreme measures. Nobody taught me how to handle that much authority. I genuinely thought I was helping. Maybe I went too far, but the cause was just watching my former self deflate as her rationalizations crumble. The truth is simpler and more horrifying than any ideology. I became addicted to the power to destroy people's lives. Feminism was just the costume I wore while indulging sadistic impulses. Convinced myself that targeting men made the cruelty virtuous. Turned legitimate social concerns into cover for personal pathology. Became a monster while believing I was a hero. Current me's final argument with past me. You're the reason people think feminism is about revenge instead of equality. You're the reason men are scared to work with women. You're the reason human resources departments are viewed with suspicion and fear. You took principles meant to help marginalized people and turned them into weapons. You are everything wrong with ideological extremism disguised as social justice. You were never a feminist, you were just a fucking predator in activist clothing. Past me has no response to that, because deep down, she always knew. The ideology was just permission to do what she wanted to do anyway. Hurt people, control people, make people fear her. Feminism was convenient because it provided moral cover for immoral behavior. But any ideology would have worked. Sociopaths always find justifications for their cruelty. Sitting here at 3 a.m., looking at the wreckage of my career and conscience. Marcus is in therapy learning to trust his instincts again. Tyler still flinches when he has to talk to human resources. David changed industries entirely rather than risk another encounter with someone like me. Dozens of other men carry psychological scars from my activism. And for what? So I could feel important and powerful for a few years? The conversations with past me are getting shorter now, because there's nothing left to argue about. She was wrong, completely and catastrophically wrong, about everything, from beginning to end. Her methods, her motives, her understanding of feminism, her basic humanity. Current me won, if you can call it winning when the prize is acknowledging you're a monster. Past me whispers sometimes, late at night. At least you tried to make a difference. At least you stood up for what you believed. At least you didn't just passively accept injustice. But even those pathetic justifications ring hollow now. Because I didn't make a difference, I made everything worse. I didn't stand up for anything. I knocked down innocent people. I didn't fight injustice. I became injustice. Current me's final statement to past me. You are the worst kind of person, someone who turns helping others into hurting others. You took the noble goal of workplace equality and perverted it into personal vengeance. You destroyed good people's lives because it made you feel powerful. You are a cautionary tale about what happens when ideology becomes excuse for cruelty. You are not a feminist, not an activist, not a hero. You are simply a bad human being. And the only thing you can do now is make sure nobody ever becomes like you were. Past me finally stays silent. Because she knows it's all true, every word of it. She was a monster wearing the mask of a social justice warrior, and no amount of rationalization can change that fact. The only justice now is ensuring she never comes back.